Alright, welcome to part 4 From Pages to Publishing. I'm Jalen Page, author of War of Broken Hearts, and today we're going to be talking about the second draft slash kind of like the initial edits, but for my process it was more of like a second draft because this plotline completely changed. Another thing I forgot to mention in the last video about your first draft is don't edit while you're doing your first draft. It better just write all my ideas down and not focus on editing because that can really be discouraging if you focus on fixing it when there's nothing even there. You just need to write it down. So, second draft is where you can go back and clean up some stuff, and in my case, guess what guys? The Realm Fracturer plot in this book did not even exist in the first draft. That was a huge turning point that made my story so much better that I practically rewrote the entire book. I had my screens up side by side, my first draft and then my new draft, and I would write, and then I would go look back at my first draft screen and make sure like the parts that I did want to keep in there, I rewrote, but I just rewrote it better. So, and then yeah, I added like a completely new plotline, which changed everything. I'm trying to remember what I even did for this on the second draft because it was so long ago because this book has went through so many drafts and edits because this is my first book I wrote. So, and I was determined to get this story out there, so I just kept writing, I kept learning, and everything changed. Honestly, I don't think anything from the first draft made it to this published copy right now, but that's okay. What I will say is I did start formatting it correctly, not actually formatting it, but you know, keeping a manuscript format to where that's something you would send out to an agent if that's what you were going to do as the trad publishing route. So I did Times New Roman font, size 12, double space. I had like the chapter headers where you would like enter 5 times, have the chapter kind of in the middle, and then enter a couple more, and then start the paragraphs at the bottom half of the page. That also just makes it look a little nicer. I did not change the margins or anything like that. I just kind of use the double space because double space makes about like 300, 350 words per page, and that's usually what you find in like an actually formatted book, but I didn't want to have to change like the pages to a book page because that just bothered me on my computer and I didn't like the way it looked. Like I said, second draft completely changed, started getting into more world building, different character development. It's kind of like developmental edits. It's the huge bigger picture of the story you're looking at, like world building, make sure you've got all that in order, character development, writing style, perspective changes, whatever you want. It's just look at the story as a whole big picture and make sure all of that is on track before you get down to the nitty-gritty. This is what it looked like for me for my drafts. First draft, this was just the plot of the Game of Love. They were mostly on Andrelia. If you've read my book, you know what I'm talking about. If not, I probably sound ridiculous. But they were just on Andrelia doing their little Game of Love. There was no action and it bored me to death, but that first draft, that terrible first draft, was what I needed to get to this. The second draft, I ended up adding the plot of the Realm Fracturer and going on these quests, and guess what? The Andrelians were not with them. It was just Adara and Dominic traveling on their own. And that didn't work out either, so later on in another draft, I changed a shit ton again to add all these other characters going with them for that found family trope and like going on these quests on this ship all across the continents. So yeah, my book would have been really boring if I didn't go through all of those changes in like my first, second, third, whatever draft, because like I said, they're basically more drafts than editing because I practically rewrote this over and over again. One thing I did forget to mention, keep your old drafts, do not delete them. There's a way on Google Drive that you can make a copy of your document. So then just keep making copies as you go along. That way, if you ever need anything, you can go back and look. And then you can also go back and find deleted scenes if you want to reuse them later. It's just very good to have that as backup in case you might want to need it again. Or if, for some reason, you want to look at your first draft again, because if I ever need to remind myself how far I've gotten, that's what I do. But yeah, once you feel it is pretty good on your drafts, then you might want to get into some feedback like beta readers, and that will be the next video I'm going to talk about.